It's 7 p.m. Tuesday, July 16th, here in Seoul.
Coming up on NewsCenter tonight. South Korea's National Intelligence Service confirms Japan's involvement in coal trading with North Korea. It says despite its warnings to Japan, the nation is still allowing the entry of ships suspected of carrying North Korean coal.
President Moon Jae-in will meet with the leaders of Korea's 5 main political parties on Thursday to discuss ways to minimize the impact of Japan's export curbs, as well as other pending issues.
President Moon appoints Yoon Seok-yeol, a reform-minded prosecutor, as Korea's new Prosecutor-General, snubbing protests from major opposition parties.
And we take a look at how some migrant women in Korea are breaking social and cultural barriers to become inspirational leaders. NewsCenter begins now. Good evening and welcome to Arirang News Center, coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Noah-Adam.
And I'm Han-Daeun. Thanks for joining us. The National Assembly's Intelligence Committee was briefed by the National Intelligence Service this afternoon. The NIS spoke of its findings on Japan's reported violation of UN Security Council sanctions on North Korea, as well as the latest developments in Pyongyang.
Now, for more, we have Kim Mo-kyun on the line for us for the details. Mo-kyun, let's start with Japan. What did the NIS reveal?
Yes, guys, the National Intelligence Service held a closed-door briefing with the National Assembly's Intelligence Committee. The spy agency said that several foreign-flagged ships suspected of carrying North Korean coal had been detected coming in and out of Japan. According to Lee Eun-jae from the main opposition Liberty Korea Party, the Togo-flagged Shining Rich and the Belize-flagged Jin Long made port calls in Japan recently. And last year, the Seoul government banned the ships from entering South Korea as they were confirmed to have brought North Korean resources to the south. The NIS also said that despite its warning that the ship's entry is a clear violation of the UN sanctions resolution, Japan is still allowing the entry and not actively taking appropriate measures.
Now, Mo-kyun, what did the NIS have to say about their findings on North Korea?
Well, first, the National Intelligence Service touched upon the latest Seoul-Pyongyang-Washington summit, calling it a significant event that boosted stalled denuclearization talks. It said that North Korea's Foreign Minister Lee Yong-ho and First Vice Minister Choi Sun-hee prepared for the trilateral summit with the help of the Workers' Party's Unification Front Department. In the upcoming Pyongyang-Washington talks, the NIS told the committee that preparations for working-level negotiations are ongoing and that it's likely that U.S. Special Representative for North Korea Stephen Biegun and former North Korean ambassador to Vietnam Kim Myong-gil will lead the talks. And concerning reports that claim North Korean nuclear negotiator Kim Hyok-chol had been executed as punishment for the failed Hanoi summit, the NIS said Kim appears to be alive. The NIS also reported that Pyongyang has been suffering from a sharp drop in trade and shortage of foreign currency due to the ongoing international sanctions. It said that Pyongyang's trade volume dropped to $2.8 billion in 2018, which is nearly half of the figure on year, and that its trade deficit increased by 17.5%. The NIS reportedly added that no unusual movement has been detected at the North's major nuclear facilities as well. Back to you guys.
Our Kim Mo-kyun for us tonight. Thank you. President Moon Jae-in will sit down with the leaders of Korea's 5 main political parties for talks on the ongoing trade spat between South Korea and Japan, as well as other issues. The meeting is to be held on Thursday afternoon at the Blue House. It was finalized by the parties earlier today at the National Assembly. The Secretary-General of the ruling Democratic Party of Korea, Yoon Ho-jung, told reporters that they agreed on the need to put aside political differences and work together to minimize the damage to the South Korean economy. It's not been decided who will attend the meeting, but the Presidential Chief of Staff for Policy, Kim Sang-jo, and Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi are expected to be there from the government side. Other issues on the table could include the pending multi-billion dollar supplementary budget bill. The Japanese government is insisting that its recent restrictions of exports of high-tech materials to South Korea are just for national security purposes, not a retaliation against Seoul for the forced labor ruling last year. But such claim isn't being sufficiently backed by the domestic media and lawmakers, who claim that the move is indeed a retaliatory measure that would damage Japan's image. Oh Jung-hee reports.
Japan claims that its export restrictions on Seoul are not retaliatory, but that view faces opposition from within. A day after South Korean President Moon Jae-in strongly criticized the measures as a grave challenge, Japan responded. Tokyo's Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga reiterated the claim Tuesday that the export restrictions are meant not to retaliate against South Korea, but only to properly control its exports for national security purposes. That point was echoed by Japan's trade minister.
From the beginning, we have made it clear that this is for national security purposes to appropriately control our exports. This is not a countermeasure, and yesterday's remark from President Moon is not on point.
By this, the Japanese government means that the new measures have nothing to do with last year's landmark rulings by South Korean judges. The Supreme Court had ordered a couple of Japanese firms to compensate South Koreans victimized through forced labor during Japan's colonial rule in the early 1900s. Officials claiming the measures are not retaliation are contradicted by Japanese newspapers and lawmakers. The Mainichi Shimbun, a major daily paper, wrote on Monday that it's an open secret that the export restrictions are connected to the court rulings. Lawmakers with Japan's opposition party say the moves are clearly countermeasures and that they'll hurt Japan's international image. When Japan announced earlier this month that it was tightening control over high-tech materials shipped to South Korea, it cited breach of trust. It had threatened sanctions on South Korea numerous times after the forced labor rulings last year. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
The South Korean government and businesses are working together on a response if Japan decides to go a step further and remove South Korea from its so-called white list of trading partners. In the meantime, Japan has demanded a response by Thursday to its proposal to form a committee to mediate over the issue that set off this trade conflict. Our Kim Hyo-sun has this report.
Tokyo has requested Seoul to respond to its request by Thursday to establish a mediation committee to discuss the South Korean Supreme Court's ruling on the issue of forced labor during Japan's colonial rule. However, the South Korean government says it cannot meet the deadline set unilaterally by Tokyo. Japan is expected to remove South Korea from its so-called white list of countries with minimum trade restrictions under the grounds that Seoul refused to respond to its diplomatic efforts to resolve the issue of wartime forced labor. After receiving feedback from related parties through July 24th, Tokyo will likely deal with the issue during its cabinet meeting and remove Seoul from its white list in late August. However, the schedule could be delayed depending on the results of the Japanese House of Councilors election slated for July 21st. The timeline could also be affected by Seoul's message to Tokyo on its August 15th National Liberation Day. Once Seoul is removed from the white list, over 1,100 items, including advanced tech materials and sensors, would be affected.
It will be difficult to continue the development of future cars. There would be immense repercussions in many areas, including employment.
To this, the South Korean government and businesses are planning to jointly respond to Japan's expected move. Seoul's trade ministry says the government, public institutions, and corporations are devising countermeasures to deal with Japan's trade curbs. It added a supplementary budget will be earmarked for South Korean industries that currently depend heavily on Japan. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
Korea's state-run think tank has released a report outlining the country's possible countermeasures against Japanese export curbs. Our Kim Hae-sung has more on that.
Diplomatic outreach efforts, filing a complaint to the WTO and imposing tariff or non-tariff barriers on Japanese exports to Korea. These are some of the measures outlined by the Korea Institute for International Economic Policy to counter Japan's export curbs. On July 4th, Tokyo imposed export restrictions on key high-tech materials to South Korea, including photoresist, fluorine polyamide, and etching gas that are used to produce chips and displays. This means Japanese exporters need permission to clear each individual shipment to South Korea, which takes around 90 days. Tokyo is also looking to remove Seoul from its whitelist of countries with minimum trade restrictions, which would impact a wider range of goods and is set to be announced as early as August. The KIEP says Korea must present its case to the international community and let the world know that Japan's move is unfair and detrimental to the global supply chain of chips and electronic goods. Korea's move to take the case to the WTO General Council next week is one example of such diplomatic measures.
South Korea can also file a complaint to the WTO that Japan does not have a clear reason to impose the restrictions. And if the restrictions result in a delay or a cut in exports to South Korea, Seoul can point out that Japan has violated GATT, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, that prohibits quantitative restrictions on the import and export of goods and distort the free flow of trade.
But it would take around 2 years for the WTO to come up with a ruling to settle the dispute. Imposing tariffs and similar trade restrictions on Japan would be a last resort, but the report warned it could result in an escalation of tensions and give Japan room to file a complaint of its own to the WTO. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
Japanese exports are faltering in the backdrop of slow global growth and falling exports to China. There are also concerns that Tokyo's recent trade restrictions on Korea could weigh further on Japanese exports. Our Son Kyung has the details.
Japanese exports remained sluggish in May, falling for the sixth consecutive month. According to the Korea International Trade Association on Tuesday, Japan's outbound shipments were tailed at roughly $54 billion in May, down nearly 8% on year. Tokyo's exports have been on a steady downward trajectory since December of last year. Although the country started the year off strong in 2018 with a 12.3% on-year surge in exports in January, the figure dropped to minus 3.9% by December. The downward trend had persisted in the new calendar year as well. Exports slumped 8.4% in January 2019, leading up to a 7.8% fall in the month of May. A senior researcher at the Korea International Trade Association said the sluggish sales of semiconductor manufacturing equipment, wireless devices, and electronic components have largely contributed to Japan's ailing exports. The share of Japanese exports in world trade is shrinking as well. Japanese exports accounted for 5.1% of the global volume in 2010, but they have fallen short of the 5% mark for nearly a decade. In 2016, the country's share of world trade hit 4.07%, further dwindling to 3.99% in 2017 and 3.75% last year. Dark clouds are looming over its export forecast for the second half of the year as well, due to Japan's trade spat with Korea, its third largest trading partner. On July 4th, Tokyo slapped new export curve on semiconductor-related materials bound for South Korea. Analysts point out that Japan's export restriction may be a self-harming measure.
Japan's decision will initially have a negative impact on South Korean exports, but eventually, their decision will end up hurting both countries because Japan would have a hard time obtaining components for their electronic goods.
The researcher emphasized that Korea-made semiconductors are essential in the production of Japanese electronics, with Korea commanding a 60% share of the global chip market. Seung-kyung, Arirang News.
The New York Times says Japan has set a dangerous precedent by justifying its trade restrictions. The paper has likened the move to the Trump administration's policies on national security. The Times also says Tokyo is hurting free and open trade. Kim Ji-yeon with more.
The New York Times criticized Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe for copying U.S. President Donald Trump and citing national security as grounds for curbing the export of high-tech materials to South Korea. The paper reported Monday that Tokyo had alluded to vague threats to its security and echoed Seoul's sentiment that the move was politically motivated. It also referred to Prime Minister Abe's remarks on free trade delivered last month before an audience of world leaders at the G20 summit in Osaka. There, Prime Minister Abe called for, quote, a free and open economy that serves as a foundation of global peace and prosperity. The report then pointed to Prime Minister Abe's contradictory stance on limiting South Korea's access to Japanese chemicals that are essential to its electronics industry. It said Japan had joined countries like the U.S. and Russia in using, quote, vague, unspecified concerns as justification for cutting off trade. Citing experts, the report says such arguments, which have been rarely invoked, are wearing away long-standing global rules intended to keep trade disputes from going out of control. Once they're weakened, the national security exception could be used more often, further damaging the world trade order. The report said more countries like Japan could frequently cite the exception ever since President Trump started to mix national security into his economic policies in promoting his America First initiative. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Turning to local politics now, and President Moon Jae-in has appointed Yoon Seok-yeol as the new Prosecutor-General. Lawmakers in the opposition say he's not fit for the job, but the ruling party see him as a reformer who'll help carry out President Moon's pledge to shake up the justice system. Shin Se-min with the details.
Despite strong objections from the opposition parties, President Moon Jae-in on Tuesday appointed reform-minded prosecutor Yoon Seok-yeol as the head of South Korea's prosecution. The presidential office announced that his 2-year tenure will begin on July 25th, a day after the outgoing Prosecutor-General Moon Moo-il's term ends. Yoon had served since 2017 as the chief of Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office, the largest prosecution office in the country, and according to the top office, he has worked to eradicate corruption. He's also known for playing a key role in probing the wrongdoings of the previous 2 conservative administrations, including the massive power abuse scandal involving former President Park Geun-hye and her longtime friend Choi Soon-sil. He also led a probe into suspicions that the country's intelligence service intervened in the 2012 presidential election. Picking Yoon to lead the prosecution is seen as reflecting the president's strong determination to reform the organization, also one of the president's key campaign pledges during the 2017 election. Still, the appointment has prompted a heated clash. Yoon's confirmation hearing report was blocked by the main opposition, who claimed Yoon was unfit for the job and that he had delivered false testimony during his confirmation hearing. Already, the main opposition Liberty Korea Party and the minor Bareunmirae Party have criticized his appointment, saying it's a sign of the president ignoring the Korean people and the parliament. The ruling Democratic Party of Korea, through a readout, has called on the opposition to stop holding back the reform process, while the Justice Party and the Center-Left Party for Democracy and Peace have agreed that Yoon's appointment is in line with the reform drive. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
If South Korea and the US hold military drills next month, working-level talks between North Korea and the US could be in jeopardy. A statement released Tuesday by the North's Foreign Ministry says if the allies go ahead with a planned joint exercise in August, it's considering scrapping the working-level talks agreed by President Trump and Kim Jong-un last month at the inter-Korean truce village of Panmunjom. Pyongyang says Washington is trying to break the spirit of the first summit last year in Singapore and is blatantly trying to pressure Pyongyang. Therefore, it says North Korea is running out of reasons to stick to the promises it's made to the US. The ministry said the North's decision not to test nuclear weapons or ICBMs is equivalent to America's pledge to stop the joint drills. US President Donald Trump's new point man for East Asia and the Pacific, David Stilwell, is due in Seoul in the coming minutes. He'll meet with senior officials from Seoul's foreign ministry and the presidential office to discuss ways to further strengthen bilateral alliance and boost cooperation in the Indo-Pacific region. In an interview last weekend with Japanese broadcaster NHK, he was asked about possible American intervention in the trade dispute between Seoul and Tokyo, to which he said both sides should talk and find a positive way out. Stilwell will leave Korea on Thursday. Nearly half of the North Korean population reportedly suffered malnutrition from 2016 to 2018. Radio Free Asia, citing an annual UN report, said just over 12 million North Koreans were undernourished during those years. The report also showed the malnutrition rate in the country rose 5 percentage points from 2015 to 2017. The report noted that only 3 countries had a higher proportion of malnourished citizens, namely Central African Republic, Zimbabwe and Haiti. A new law aimed at preventing workplace bullying is now in effect. It gives people legal protection from behaviours such as forcing people to drink alcohol or fetch coffee. Lee Seung-jae reports.
Constant messages from your boss after clocking out for the day. Being forced to drink copious amounts of alcohol because you were late to a company dinner. Being told to make coffee for everyone because you're a female worker. All these forms of harassment that were once overlooked, even condoned in South Korea, are now punishable under a new workplace anti-bullying law, which took effect Tuesday after a 6-month grace period. While physical and sexual assault within the workplace are already handled in the legal domain in South Korea, harassment has mostly been overlooked until now. The new law stipulates that workplace bullying is defined as incurring physical or mental suffering or worsening the work environment when employers or workers use their status or power and act beyond the proper scope of work.
This law covers all workers, so even when an employee harasses another employee, the law protects the victim regardless.
If workplace bullying is reported, employers are required to immediately investigate it and take proper actions to help the victim or victims. If retaliatory measures are taken against the victims who reported the harassment, employers could face up to 3 years behind bars and a fine of up to $25,000. However, the law does not stipulate the appropriate punishment for the perpetrator, which legal analysts say is the law's weak point. A separate law also took effect on Tuesday. It stipulates that stress stemming from workplace bullying is considered an industrial disaster and allows for compensation. The new anti-bully law is expected to root out so-called 갑질 in the workplace in South Korea. 갑질, a recently coined word, refers to abusive acts by people in positions of power or those under their influence. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
As of this May, there was a record number of young Koreans putting off getting a job in order to prepare for various career-related exams. Data released by Statistics Korea on Tuesday show there were nearly 4.7 million young people aged 15 to 29 who were economically inactive. Of them, more than 15% were found to be preparing for exams to get hired for positions and jobs of their choice. That's the highest level since related data was first compiled in 2006, and around 88,000 more than to the year before. Of those preparing for a career advancement, nearly 31% of them said they wanted to take the National Civil Service exam, while nearly 25% said they're working on professional licenses. There are roughly 130,000 women in Korea who moved here for marriage. Many of them struggle to overcome social and cultural barriers, as well as problems like domestic violence. But there are a number of migrant women providing leadership and inspiration. Our Oh Soo-young has the story.
Helping foreign brides become more than a typical housewife. That's the #1 mission for Ira, a Mongolian woman who is Korea's first ever politician of foreign descent. Having moved to the country 16 years ago, Lee says she feels more at home in her former constituency of Seongnam than in Mongolia. She was elected to the Gyeonggi-do Provincial Assembly in 2010.
I never even dreamt of being a politician back in Mongolia, but suddenly in Korea I was 33 years old in office, working with budgets and representing the foreign population here.
She may have now left office, but she's sticking to a pledge of giving immigrants a voice through her organisation, which supports women who move to Korea through marriage. Acknowledging the struggles they face in overcoming social and cultural barriers, and even cases of domestic violence, Lee aims to help migrant women become more independent and entrepreneurial.
It's crucial for women to leave their homes, socialize, and find sources of income. We're working with Seongnam City to train our women in medical tourism so that they can turn their native language skills into a specialized profession.
When Won Ok-gun first moved to Korea with her husband in 1997, She felt trapped at home, unable to speak the language or develop a career. She decided to challenge herself by learning interpretation skills and began helping other foreign wives communicate with their husbands by translating their letters in an online community.
I felt the limitation of simple translations. I wanted to provide more practical support, so I began working with NGOs and became one of the first consultants on the Tanuri Emergency Hotline for migrant women, which has now expanded to 13 different languages.
One is now a legal interpreter and a representative for the local Vietnamese community.
Throughout the years, I saw how passionately and selflessly Korean activists fought for our rights as migrants. They showed me how I should and could do so much more for my own people, especially women.
Recognized for her efforts, Won was named Seoul's honorary mayor in 2016, a role she says she'll always strive to fulfill. Among the 130,000 women who moved to Korea for marriage, a growing number of them are working to improve social conditions so that others can enjoy their rights to well-being and decent jobs, as well as reach their full potential in Korean society. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
The iconic changing of the guard ceremony at Gyeongbokgung Palace in Seoul can now be seen at Incheon International Airport. The Korea Cultural Heritage Foundation says the decision to hold the ceremonies at the airport is due to the symbolism it holds as the main gateway into Korea. Just as the ones seen in Gyeongbokgung Palace, the ceremony will feature the royal guards wearing bright military uniforms of the Joseon dynasty in a display of tradition and discipline. The ceremony will be held 3 times a day inside the departure hall of Terminal 2, except for Tuesdays.
Foreign residents in South Korea who missed their health insurance payments at least 4 times will not be granted visa extensions. Those who miss up to 3 payments will only be allowed an extension of 6 months or less. The changes will take effect starting next month. Foreigners who stay in Korea for more than 6 months are now required to sign up to the public health insurance. Students and skill training visa holders, however, are exempt until March 2021. South Korean scientists have developed an AI drone detection system which can spot miniature drones as far as 3 kilometers away. A joint research team from Daegu Gyeongbuk Institute of Science and Technology and California State University used the latest in radar and machine learning technology to create the new detection system. It's expected to have promising military applications once it's commercialized later this year. South Korea's automobile production and exports rose in the first half of this year on the back of new SUVs from local car makers. Trade Ministry data shows auto exports from January to June rose 2.5% on year, shipping out over 1 million units. Most of those were eco-friendly cars like electric sedans and SUVs. The country's auto production also edged up 1.2% on year over the same period, with total output exceeding 2 million vehicles. A recent study has found that eating more marine plants like seaweed helps lower the risk of colorectal cancer by around 1/3. The study was conducted by a team of researchers at the National Cancer Center in South Korea. Sea kelp and sea mustard, known as miok in Korean, were found to be more effective in reducing the risk of colorectal cancer than seasoned seaweed. Researchers say marine plants that grow near the peninsula are rich in biologically active substances that help increase the amount of antioxidants within the body. That has been your 3-minute news flash. It is that time now where we take a look at Arirang's digital media content.
And today we have another episode of When in Korea or Wink with Justin.
K-pop stars were summoned interrogation at Seoul's police
The alleged
headquarters.
use and distribution of drugs and rape
CEO
videos
of
at a
YG
nightclub.
Entertainment
Unlike last
has
time,
announced that he's stepping down from his posts at the company.
So in today's episode, I'll be interviewing several different people to ask them how they feel about this issue.
안녕하세요.
안녕하세요.
저는 서울에 살고 있는 블랙핑크의 팬이고요.
YG 불매운동에 대해서 들어본 적 있나요?
네, 공감을 해요. 왜냐면 소속사 측에서도 문제가 있는 거고 그런 문제를 사람들이 다 알고 그래야 된다는 걸 동감을 하는 것 같아요.
불매운동에 대해서는 좋은 것 같다고 생각해요. 왜냐면 사회적으로 정말 논란을 일으키고 연예인들이다 보니까 또 우리 청소년들도 많이 보잖아요. 해야 될 것 같은데.
불매운동 해야 된다?
네.
난 별로 안 생각하는데.
왜요?
굳이 욕해야 될 필요는 없잖아요.
근데 뭔가 잘못한 건 잘못한 거니까 그래서 뭔가 해야 될 것 같아요.
YG 소속 연예인들은 죄가 없다고 생각해요. 블랙핑크라든지 다른 분들 있잖아요. 그 사람들은 그렇게 될 줄 몰랐잖아요.
괜히 애꿎은 열심히 연습한 사람들까지 피해를 보면 좀 너무 억울하지 않을까.
하는 게 맞다고 생각해요.
하는 게 맞다고? 왜 하는 게 맞다고 생각했는지.
소속 연예인이니까 소비를 하면 YG에 돈이 가니까 이제 소비를 하면 안 된다고
최대한
생각합니다.
도움이 안 됐으면.
네.
뭐 아무리 잘 행동을 해왔다고 해도 다 알 건데 그쪽 식구들은 다 알 건 알 텐데 뭐 이런 생각을 하는 거죠.
And now we're here to meet someone special who contacted us first, saying that he had a lot to say about the specific YG issues. Let's go meet him right now.
예, 안녕하세요.
안녕하세요.
저는 서울에 살고 있는 블랙핑크의 팬이고요. 일부 시민 여러분들 중에 YG가 부정하게 번 돈으로 그걸로 성공을 했기 때문에 거기에 영향받은 다른 연예인들도 같이 처벌을 받아야 된다라고 하셨는데 사실은 YG에 지금 있는 스캔들은 어떻게 보면 개인의 비위지 그 사람들이 부당하게 번 돈이 아니에요. 예를 들면 YG 엔터테인먼트는 음악 관련 회사인데 음악으로 관련해서 뭔가 잘못 저지른 건 없잖아요. 그렇기 때문에 그 개인의 잘못만큼은 역시나 법에 정해진 대로 처벌을 받고 뭐 그걸 통해서 다른 가수들도 피해를 봐야 된다라는 주장을 저는 좀 동의하기 어렵네요. 저는 이왕 본보기를 보일 거라면 어떻게든 사회가 그 사람들을 잘못을 저지른 걸 뉘우치는 거에 대해서 용서를 해주고 포용해 주는 게 저는 더 옳은 본보기라고 생각을 해요. 관용과 용서가 없었다면 뭐 우리가 좋아하는 아이언맨도 없었겠죠. 예를 들면 로버트 다우니 주니어도 그 사람 알려지기로 젊었을 때 굉장히 실수를 많이 했었는데 아이언맨으로 세컨 찬스를 얻고 나서 역대에 남을 어떤 IP가 탄생을 했고 우리가 그릇도 커져야 그 K-팝을 담을 수 있다고 생각해요. K-팝이 너무 커졌기 때문에.
Some people were in support of the YG boycott, while some people were kind of against it. Let us know what you guys think personally. We're very curious what you have to say. Yeah, I'll see you guys next week.
The nation continues to be in the shadow of rain clouds, and a monsoon front is in the forecast for tomorrow.
For more details, let's turn to our Michelle Park at the Weather Centre. Michelle.
The nation lingers under a very unstable atmosphere in addition to hot temperatures and unbearable humidity. So I advise you to have your umbrellas ready, especially if you are in the southern regions tomorrow, as another monsoon front will soak the area with heavier rain. And Jeju Island will start to receive rain in the afternoon, with the southern provinces expected to get wet by nighttime. And depending on the regions, precipitation could rise up to 30 millimeters of rain per hour. Now, taking a look at the temperature readings for tomorrow, Seoul will begin the morning a degree higher than today, waking up to 23 degrees Celsius under cloudy skies for most parts of the peninsula. And hot and humid weather conditions are in store for tomorrow as well. Now, Seoul's mercury will climb up to 32 degrees, while Busan and Jeju are slightly lower in the high 20s. And the monsoon rain is expected to continue until Friday, and for now, the capital will have cloudy skies with daily highs rising into the low 30s up until this weekend. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That wraps up this edition of Arirang News. Thank you, as always, for watching.
News in Depth is next.